Hello, everyone. This is Kurt Goulder from the Natural Law Institute. I'm here with my good friend and partner in crime, Luke Weinhagen. And he's an author of a lovely book that I'd like him to show you right now, which is the Primal Primer. It invokes so many good jokes every time I see that because I want to think about what kind of primal stuff is it inspiring.
Right.
Anyway, so look, we've done 13 chapters so far. This is chapter 14.
Yep.
And so what is it that you want to get across in chapter 14?
So chapter 14 is about combining all of the situational awareness and behavioral analysis tools that we've explored in the book into improved decision making, right? It's the why that we're developing all those skills, right? I mean, each of those skills are useful on their own, right? They can be used in a lot of different situations, but for our purposes, we're putting them all together to improve our decision making as we move through environments, right? So so that we can recognize challenges in those environments, and we can take action, make decisions about, and take action on those challenges and how we respond to those challenges, right? So that's the real reason. That's the why of we're developing all the other skill sets that go into situational awareness and behavioral analysis. So that's what this chapter is about. It's called "If Something Feels Wrong, It Probably Is." And that's the big thing here is we start paying attention to that those cues we're picking up from our environments, right? We've been trained to ignore them. It's time to relearn to pay attention to them.
So here's what I thought because I'm sure the audience recognizes when you interview somebody, usually you either develop a set of stuff, right, about them, or they send you some stuff. And Luke sends me a prep, right, which is here's the stuff we're going to talk about because he's a professional. And that's what, if you're a professional, you do to an interviewer. So the interviewer doesn't sound stupid. And so they ask you relatively intelligent questions, something we all struggle to do. Anyway, so when I saw this, I actually really loved that. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The question that inspired me was that we seem so obsessed with, gee, what fancy toy can I play with my attention right now? Or what greedy expression, greedy in computer terms, a greedy algorithm is something that just tries to get a lot of stuff in, right? It doesn't mean it's good, right? And it doesn't mean it's like being selfish. It just means it tries to get a lot of stuff. So I'm thinking about all these people who are, walking around with phones and driving cars and not paying attention or other stuff in their mind. And one of the things you've been trying to do is say, you need to be present. Now, a lot of the feminine version of this is called living in the moment. Well, that's about feeling. Right. But you're doing the same thing, except you're saying living in the moment is about perceiving. Right. And so I thought that was interesting in that, well, how do we teach people? I mean, I know that's what you're trying to do, but how do we get people to do that with that kind of, because I interpret that as being responsible.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I interpret what you're saying is be responsible for your environment, and therefore you be responsible for yourself. Because when you're doing all this distracting stuff, other people are taking responsibility, your ability to be responsible from you, and you're surrendering it willingly, like a drug addict. Yes. So I've when I saw this, I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to paint this picture so that Luke can give us some brilliant insight. So how do you tell people that that's what they want to do? That they want to be responsible adults instead of adolescent or really childish consumers.
Right. So it's funny because that's what all we're talking about here is marketing, right? This attention. But what marketing is doing is trying to drive you to make a decision and take an action, right? So the entire world of marketing is actually leveraging this inherent trait in humans' ability to navigate their environments. It's just who's benefiting from it. Are you benefiting from this decision making that leads to action, or is whatever's capturing your attention benefiting from this decision making that leads to action?
Okay, right? So what you're saying is there's this something I actually rebel against because I have a different, my framework is different. Is I'm like, well, people say, well, people live in an illusion. No, we don't. We're actually incredibly good at perceiving reality as it is.
Yes. Yes.
If we pay fucking attention,
Yes.
right? And so I was like, so what I'm visioning when you're talking about marketing is I'm visioning some like people who have this, who put this big thing around your eyes and they beam laser beams into your eyes, the back of it, to make you so you can't pay attention
Yeah.
to the world around you.
Right. It's not that you're not paying attention to anything. It's just they're controlling what you're paying attention to. And that's their entire aim, is to get you focused on them, so that
Yes.
all of your decision making process is focused on them, and all of your action processes then are focused on them. That results in a sale, that results in some sort of exchange that's to their benefit, right? What I'm
Yes.
suggesting is we want to maintain that same approach. We want all of the exchanges to be to our benefit as well.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't want to
Exactly.
lose out on those exchanges, because
Yeah.
that never ends. Our attention is always being traded for some sort of benefit to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what paying attention is. That's what awareness is, right? It's what we're trading our attention for, right? Are we trading our attention for victimhood, or are we trading our attention for agency, for responsibility, right? And that's what we're aiming ourselves
I
at with
love
this material.
it. You're training your attention for either responsibility
Right.
or victimhood. That's
Yes.
brilliant. That's genius. And that should be, I don't know, that seems like a book cover.
Right.
Anyway, so the problem you're trying to get people to do, and I know you're not obsessive about this, which is what I like, but it's something I'm conscious of as we're working through it is, yeah, it's tempting. You say it's tempting as you develop the intentional skills of situational awareness. But I mean, don't all these stimuli tell us not to? I mean, how do you convince yourself to be such? I mean, we've talked about this before. We grew up in a different world, right? And so situational awareness is just instinctual for me, right? I mean, it says for you. But what if it isn't for these people? How do they convince themselves to actually pay attention to the world around them?
Right. Well, and it really, it starts with practice. The stuff that we're doing here, like you and I have explored quite a bit, is this is all very natural, and it's very natural to us because we didn't have it disrupted.
Yes, yes.
Right. And so what I'm trying to do is disengage the disruption and
Okay.
return to the natural state of being aware of what's going on around us.
Mhm.
We were talking about it in another conversation, but we've we've gotten to a point as a people, just because of technological advancements and things like that, where we've reached a level of comfort where this notion of that life is potentially at risk is an abstraction for most people. But that's not a real part of their equation anymore. And
Maybe they need to spend more time in places like Detroit and Baltimore and Oakland. You know, I mean,
right, right. Well, and well, that's the thing is, we recognize the human risks, and we can see that from a distance, but we're not even paying attention to the small threat, or what I call the small threats, that are around us all day, every day. I mean, you're walking down the street, you have thousands of pounds of metal and
yes.
fluids and plastics and stuff hurtling by you, controlled by people you don't know, that you're trusting implicitly to not plow into you.
Mhm.
That's a huge risk that you're just exposed to all day,
Yes,
every
yes,
time you
yes.
leave the house, right? So, I mean, we're surrounded by risks, but we shut off our sensitivity to those risks. We condition ourselves away from recognizing them as risks. I was watching a video earlier today, and there was a crane collapsing, and it was building a
Yeah,
building in New York City. And the
yes,
crane was collapsing, and it was crushing the building next to it and falling down onto the street, right? That's an inherent risk that exists every time they're constructing a building, but nobody looks at that and goes, that thing is a risk to me, because nobody's paying
it's funny
attention to it.
you bring that example because of course, I've done most of my adult life in Bellevue,
Right.
and this one of these cranes collapsed right next to my building,
Right.
and it's the one that killed one guy sitting in his living room playing video games. I mean, it's like the hand of God out of. I mean, he's like, what situational awareness prepares me for having a freaking crane? Well, maybe there was one. Anyway, took out the side of our office, right? The side of our office building, and it took out that guy. So I mean, so is there a distinction between what you can prepare for and what not? I mean,
There's a distinction in what you can prepare for and what you're not. But what's really important here is just coming to terms in some way, shape, or form with the fact that we are never completely safe. It's not
yes,
possible to
yes,
become completely safe. And so we have to escape this delusion that we can create perfect safety around us. Right?
yes,
It'll never
yes.
be the case. I mean, we're on a giant rock hurtling through space that could collide with other giant rocks
And
at any
space isn't
time.
nice.
Right,
It's not
right.
nice.
We, we,
It's
we
not
live
your friend.
we live in an inherently hostile environment at all scales, right? I mean, from like we're talking about walking down the street to the universe itself, right? And it's dispassionately trying to destroy us. It has no intent to do so. It just doesn't care whether we live or
No.
die, right? And it has all these things in place that are just ready to take us out all the time, right? So we live in an inherently unsafe state at all times, right? And it's great that we can mentally escape that from time to time, right? We need to relax out of that from time to time. And a lot of what we talk about in this material does that eventually once you become practiced at it, right? It's that state of relaxed readiness that I talk about achieving when you start getting proficient with these techniques, right?
Right.
Because when you build the competence to navigate challenges, right, they become less of a insurmountable threat, right?
Hmm.
They aren't so much a fear trigger anymore as they are simply a challenge that you're capable of overcoming,
That's right.
right? So that's kind of what we're aiming ourselves at here. And then it's not that when you reach that state you get to pay less attention. It's that the paying attention part becomes less and less stressful, becomes less and
Oh,
less
I
stress
see. So
inducing.
that's the sell. That's the sell. Is
Right,
that it may take you 90 days to form the habit of being more
right,
sexually, but
right,
the result of which is it will actually be habituated in less work,
right,
but you'll also be have more mindfulness.
right. And that's why in the subtitle for the book I say survive anything, slay anxiety, and exit the system. Right, the slay anxiety piece is exactly that. It's not that we're eliminating the sources of anxiety from your world. It's that we're eliminating the undue stress that those
Right,
sources produce
right,
in you.
right, right.
Right? We're increasing your ability to navigate those sources without being set into a state of inaction, without being shut down by them, without having the emotional spikes
Right.
of those
I'm
exposures.
thinking of the number of moms who don't recognize the stroller is rolling away from them.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I see that
yeah.
all the time, and I'm just like, how can that happen?
Right,
How is that possible for a human to allow that to happen?
right, right. Yeah, yeah, but even in this material, it's easy to get caught up in the steps, in the details, right? Like the atmospherics, the reading the room, right? The recognizing how people are moving through the room, the proxemics, right? The interpreting the nonverbal communication, the kinesics, and then looking for picking up on people's involuntary responses, the biometrics, right? We can get over focused on even those elements, individual elements, and sit there and looking at them and looking at them and looking at them and trying to read them and get more and more clarity and more clarity, long past the time where you ought to have been making a decision, and taking action based on that decision, right? So we can, even in the process of learning this material, we can get lost in the details. We can get distracted. The act of practicing situational awareness can become as addictive as our cell phone if we
I
don't
don't know. I
orient
mean, I'm
ourselves
not
towards.
complimenting you here, but my whole thing is enumerate, serialize, and operationalize, and your
Right,
freaking book is an entire exercise and enumerate, serialize, and operationalize. And so I'm like, well, you say people get lost in the details. I didn't have that problem reading your book because every step is so clear, and so I don't know. I mean, I think when you're reading something like this, it's pretty lucky you'll forget a step though, right? I mean, but I don't see it as, I mean, I don't see excessive detail
right. No.
here.
I tried hard not to go into excessive
And that's my
detail
problem, right? I
in the
mean,
chapters, right? And I certainly wanted to, but I wanted to keep it consumable, right? I mean, each chapter in this book could be its own book. I think
right,
the
exactly.
material is
Yes.
deep enough that we could explore it to that level of depth. But that doesn't accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish for people with this book specifically, which is that get to that decision, make the decision, and then take action. Right? And
Right.
that's really what I focus on in this chapter. Right. is to get people so that they are there, right? So, and that's what I mean. That's that when you reach that point, that's when the anxiety starts to be tempered. That's when you can survive all these situations because you know how to navigate them. It's not that you know the specific details about this specific situation, it's that you've built enough foundation of competence where there's not going to be a situation you're exposed to that disrupts you, that you to the point where you won't be able to survive it. I mean, unless it's the world ending type of situation where nobody's going to survive, right? You're not going to escape the nuclear explosion because you know what's in this book. But I'm talking about if it's possible for an individual to survive the situation, you're going to be that individual because you have this foundation of competence that you're drawing from, right? And these learnings and experiences that you can extrapolate from to navigate successfully this challenge that you're being confronted with. And of course, the overarching theme throughout the book is that what I call exit the system. And I don't mean that flippantly. I really mean that in order for you to be a participant in the system, it has to be a choice, right? It has to be your
really
decision.
Smart. That's really smart. And I'm sure you've said it before, but it didn't sink in. So what do you mean? Exiting the system is a very smart frame.
Right.
So can you talk about that? Because I mean, I can explain that to people.
Sure. So,
because it sounds like some hippie thing, and you don't mean it like that.
Yeah. It sounds like some counterculture. We're trying to, we're libertarians, and we're going to shut down, all of the institutions and all that kind of stuff. And sure, right, great. But what I really mean is that, this is the theme running throughout the book, is that what we currently think of as conveniences largely aren't, because we cannot sustain ourselves without them. Right. So we're thinking we're taking advantage of a technology when really we've become dependent upon that technology. Like, I use the grocery store as an example frequently, right? If they locked the doors to the grocery store today and they had no plans of opening up and there's not another one nearby you, what do? That means that if you don't have an answer for that, that grocery store is not a convenience for you. Right. That grocery store is something you depend on. You cannot exist without.
Right. It's a dependency.
Right. So there's no exit for you from that dependency.
Right.
That is a system that's in place. That is a system of control over you rather than a system of convenience for you. Right. And so what I'm trying to do is give people the choice of engaging in those systems, which means they have the option to exit those systems.
Okay. So when you refer to the system, you're thinking of things that make you dependent, not independent.
Yes. Things that undermine your ability to be agentic.
Right.
Because you are removed from the decision-making process if you can't say no to it.
Right. And so, you use this. That's another one of your tools is, can I say no to this?
Right.
Right. If I can't say no to this, I'm a dependent.
Right.
They controlling me. Right?
Well, and what's our overarching goal for all the work that we do? We're trying to preserve the opportunity for cooperation everywhere. Right. That's what we're working on. Right. And so the big thing that I'm trying to get across to people is that, we think of cooperation and we think of the positive, we think of the affirmative, we think of yes as the word that drives cooperation. What my point is that actually no is the most important word in cooperation, because if you can't say no to whatever you're doing, whatever you're cooperating on, then it's not cooperation.
You're such a falsificationist.
Yeah, I mean, but truly, I mean, it's not. You're not engaged.
I didn't get the laugh out of that I wanted.
But that's what drives it, though, is all the work that we do on falsificationism. Right?
Yes,
I mean, we want to think of cooperation as this positive thing. But if you can't say no to it, something else is in play. Some other motivating factor is in play beyond cooperation. It's compulsion, it's coercion, it's manipulation. There's something in play that's driving your compliance, and it's not cooperation. So all of the steps in this book, what I'm doing is I'm equipping the reader to say no so that they can engage in cooperation, so that we can be responsible adults and cooperate with each other to move us all forward. Can't do that if you can't say no. And that's what exit the system means, right? It just means you're able to say no at any step of the way.
So simple.
It really should be. We've gotten away from it being very simple.
It's kind of annoying. It's like one of those things where once you understand a thing, you reduce it to something very simple. It's like, why do I feel stupid now?
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand that I'm under control unless I can say no.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
you should be asking, can I say no to this? Can I do without this? Well, if not, then I'm a victim rather than.
And that's a great frame to use. And then the next question is, how can I say no to this?
Yes, yes.
Right. If you're not in a point where the answer is absolutely yes, you can say no to this, then that's the fix is asking that question is, how can I say no to this? Right? And that's the question I asked for each chapter of the book is like, what's the thing that's happening here? And then what can we do at a very basic level to position ourselves to be able to say no to this? And that's why I do all the, find your own food stuff, find your own water stuff, build your own shelter. Those are the ground level, floor level, human competence level, say no,
Mhm.
lessons that we just have to have.
I keep thinking about the grocery store thing.
Yeah.
Because it's so obvious. I mean,
Well,
look,
and the real rub about it is we saw it happening during the lockdowns.
yes, we did.
That was one of the mechanisms, the levers of compliance they were at least threatening was we're not going to give you access to the grocery store if you don't comply with this government order. And I don't care what you feel about the government order. That's irrelevant. The fact that they can do it
Is
is
terrible,
concerning.
right?
Because
It's
if they
also
can do it there, they can do it anywhere.
like it's debanking people is really bothering me.
Yeah. Yes.
That should not be legal.
It
I
shouldn't
mean,
be legal.
it should not be. That's cutting me off from electricity. It's the same or water.
Right.
You can't do that for political reasons. That's just
Right.
wrong.
Yes.
Uh, so it's like I was thinking about. Well, the Mormons have a thing, right? How much food do they got to? They got to keep around like 90 days worth of food.
Yeah, it's part of their belief system. They have to
And
have
I'm like, that's freaking genius, right?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I have flour and sugar and that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, they keep it going. They're serious about it.
Right. Right. And I fully support, people preparing in that manner. The reason I don't focus a lot about, the prepping side of things with the material is because your house can be taken from you. You could have people come in and
Right.
force you out, or the house can burn down, or eventually those resources still run out. So you're going to
Right.
survive 90 days longer than everybody else, but then you still reach the same point of what do I do now?
I know, but it's just the thing is, you're right. It's really not that good an example because it sounds like a prepper thing when it's just a really simple one to understand.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just easy to understand. I mean, you use water, which early on in the book, which I thought was a brilliant way of making it obvious. But it's the whole thing of can I say no to this? Am I dependent or independent? That's just good. I mean, it's situational awareness over time, which is
right. Yeah, and look at what they're doing in California right now. They're in the process of destroying 4 dams, 4 reservoirs, and this is a state that has been complaining about droughts for the last decade. And what's that going to do to the individual's water supply in California? They're getting more and more dependent on their government access to water, and their government's constricting that access while the whole population is getting more and more dependent on it. That sets up a terrible state between those people, those parties, those systems, right? That makes that those people living there are in a weaker and weaker position to say no when the government comes along and says, do this or we shut your water off.
Yeah, I'm not the only one. So when you do war games, they throw stupid stuff at you.
Yeah.
Right. So and it's really boring, right? I mean, it's not like this fancy thing on TV, right? You sit at a table and messages come in, right? I mean, they bring you written stuff. It's boring. But one thing I was like, California, they're always talking trash, but I mean, to turn California back in the desert is like an afternoon's lazy work. I mean, it doesn't take anything at all. It's a reclaim. Most of the state is a reclaimed desert. Or you're not gonna. That's not very. You're there for dependent there, and the government's crazy. But anyway, let's go on with your. Rather than get sidetracked into talking about crazy stuff, let's talk about the sane stuff. Now you have a beautiful paragraph here that goes into. It can become tempting as you develop these skills.
Mm-hmm.
To keep reading the room, learning the room, recognizing the people, etc. But our purpose here is to make sure you can survive anything, to slay your anxiety. So I think you made that point really clear in this discussion.
Yeah.
But your next topic is, okay, so now that we understand the value proposition, because I think we made the value, that was our goal, to make the value proposition. Your next thing is, like, if something feels wrong, it probably is. I love this one, except of course I did the via negativa and say, yeah, but there's a lot of crazies in the world that find stuff that's wrong that isn't. So I mean, so let's talk about one and then how to handle the other.
Sure. So, and that's kind of what I jump into in this next section of the book. That's what I start going into here. So what we're doing here is kind of retraining your gut, retraining your instinct, right? And the reason we have to do that is because culturally we get conditioned away from our instincts, and that conditioning undermines our intuition through false signals, and they may be good intentions, but it's still very adverse training to us.
Yes.
Right. So we get told treat everyone equally. We get told be nice to everybody. We get told don't recognize the differences between people. We get told not to judge based on how people look or how they act or how they behave. These are well-intentioned messages, but they're
wrong.
super destructive to our ability to pick up on threats in our environments.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They destroy our ability to trust our instincts. They destroy our ability to trust our gut. Right. And that's what I mean when I say if something feels wrong, it probably is. Now, we've been conditioned away from acknowledging that. Doesn't change the fact that if something feels wrong, if there's something, we're always picking up signals. Our limbic system, our midbrain, is always picking up signals from our environment. Right. This is an evolved survival skill.
Yes. Everything from, I was just thinking of everything from Aesop's fables to Pinocchio is trying to teach you to be aware of people bearing false promises.
Right. And that's a big thing for me. Everybody, we talk about, the crazies that are picking up on false things. Everybody wants to be able to trust their gut. But my question for them is always, what have you done? What have you demonstrated to yourself? What evidence do you have that your gut is trustworthy?
That's right.
What training have you done to make sure your gut is trustworthy? What exercises, practices? What do you do to maintain the trust in your gut? Right. And most people don't have an answer for that. And that's what a lot of this material is. It's gut training. It's restoring the ability to trust.
And I'm drawn to the female side, which is, I have learned this repeatedly in life, painfully, that women are attracted to what they understand, but what they understand may be bad.
Right.
Right. And so, so you can apply that not only to the perception of a mate, but you can, I mean, maybe, for example, I like women with purple hair. That would be a bad thing, right? I mean, right. So I'm sorry, I didn't get the laugh out of you I wanted. But then there's feel bad now. I didn't get my
poisonous creatures often signal their lethality through bright colors. So.
Okay, that was good. So, but there's other things, whereas people mask effectively.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to be fairly situationally aware.
Yeah.
I mean, my girlfriend grew up in Manhattan. She said, I never had a single problem in my life. Well, I mean, but if you walk with her around the street, she's constantly saying, okay, move here, move. Okay, let's stop here and let's cross the street here.
Yes.
Right. I mean, she's incredibly situationally aware. Of course she didn't. The other thing, she lives at 34th and Park. It's not like exactly living in Brooklyn or something.
Well, the problem there, so the male evolved more to face the external threats, the outside the group threats, right? The dangers from the jungles, the dangers from the other tribes, things like that. The female evolved largely to evaluate the internal threats, to navigate the social challenges that emerge, right? And so they're very, very good, sensitive to that, just through the evolution of what their midbrain is picking up, right? And they're very good at picking up on those signals. They're also much more sensitive to this conditioning, this undermining of that intuition because of that. Right. So they benefit more than anybody. Redevelopment of the skill set, redevelopment of the application of these trainings, right? Because it's not that they're not capable or good at picking up the signals. It's that they've been trained away from interpreting them correctly.
Oh, I see.
Right. We've done them a huge disservice by providing this illusion that ultimate safety is possible.
Mhm.
right? So we've killed, or in the process of killing, their ability to identify a threat as a threat
Correctly.
correctly. Yeah. And so
So,
that, and that's why we really need to start rebuilding our connection to these instincts, both
so
male and female, men and women.
right.
So
So anyway, so you, how do you say this here? Now that we've trained your gut or begun to, you can start using it. But our cultures have transitioned us away from our instincts through false signals and good intentions. All right, you've already covered that, but these things to improve intuition, we can complete the process. Oh, I see. So you're trying to, this whole paragraph is, you can try to make your goal is through this process of making it, of looking at the tangible factors, is
right.
to make it rationally accessible so you can develop a competent gut.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we're leveraging our instinct, we're filtering it through our intuition, and then we're applying our intelligence on top of that to restore that competent gut, that trustworthy
Yeah.
gut, right? So that intuition, right? So that women's intuition, right? That should be a useful tool. That should be a valuable tool to the women in our society. But that means that requires training to make it valuable again, because
Right.
we've conditioned ourselves away from it.
Well, I mean,
Same
it's
thing for
also that
men.
we vary, right? And we vary in sensitivity. Some,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
right? So okay. So how do we defend against imperfect decisions?
Oh, we don't. We pursue imperfect decisions. That's kind of what we get into next. We get into actual practices and skills to start speeding up the decision making process. That's the next section of the book. So we've been building the skill sets, right? And in this section, I reinforce topics that we touched on earlier. You need to be actively observing, be ready to act, conscious of context and relevance, right? Those are important themes throughout the book, is the context and relevance. That's how we filter our baselines and our anomalies. The big thing here is you need to become the anomaly hunter in order to be the decision maker, right? You have to be looking for the signals, right? So what that really means is you just stop dismissing them, is the important part. So we've been conditioned to dismiss them, like we said. Don't notice the differences. Don't, if the big bang happens in the background, ignore it or make it fit into your pattern, right? It's just a car backfiring or whatever.
Right,
If
right,
there's a clown standing behind the counter, make up some reason in your mind for it to be there rather than recognizing it, that that's something that shouldn't be there, right? Same thing with people wearing masks in inappropriate places and stuff like that. We have to stop trying to create or imagine a reason for that to be okay, and recognizing that that's something that doesn't fit, and note that that's something that doesn't fit, right? And that's what I mean by being the anomaly hunter, right? We should have to stop ignoring the signs that we're already receiving. Largely, right? So because we're getting them all the time, we don't have to put a lot of effort into getting the signals. They're jamming us all the time with signals. The whole world is, right? And then we evolved to pick them up, so we just got to stop ignoring them. So in order to get to that point, though, we have to take a look at the imperfect decision, and that's the next section, right? I walk through the process of making imperfect decisions, right? We want to be our goal is to be collecting just enough information about potential threats or challenges to respond before that threat rolls over us, right? If we start chasing the perfect decision, it's going to do nothing for it. We're going to keep getting hit with the threat. It's going to do nothing for us getting out in front of it, right? So we don't want to be waiting for perfect information. The rule of thumb I use throughout the book, the rule of thumb I was taught, is we want to be looking for about a 70% decision. So we picked up on about 70% of the cues we need to say, okay, this is a problem and I need to do something about this problem, right? We don't have to wait for perfect clarity. We don't have to wait for perfect confirmation. We just want to be reasonably sure.
You're trying to overcome a couple of different problems there.
Yeah.
You're trying to overcome, what do I do?
Yeah.
Do I pay attention?
Yes.
What do I do? And am I going to be rude or create attention for doing this? Right. And
right.
You're trying to cover these three categories of problems. And what you're saying is, well, you don't have to be very certain. You just have to be, your gut has to be aware that there's a potential here, not a certainty,
right,
but a potential.
Right. And and when you're first developing this skill set, you're gonna get it wrong. You're gonna pick up on false signals. You're gonna over exaggerate things. You're gonna under exaggerate things. You're gonna get it wrong, right? And that's part of the process.
Yeah, I think
right?
that's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a good thing. It helps refine and increase our fidelity for picking up the right signals as we start, recognizing that we got signals wrong, right? So it's hugely important to make mistakes in this process. So one of the tools that I offer in this is called heuristic decision making, right? And if you've done software work, you're familiar with heuristics, but a lot of people haven't done software work. So what I'm talking about here is kind of the way I presented to people and the way I presented the book. It's the connected dots method of identifying a pattern, right? So you can start with just a few dots, and it gives you kind of a shape of what you're looking at, and that's what our tools are giving us. That's what our atmospherics and our proxemics and our kinesics and our biometrics are giving us. They're giving us dots that we can use to create a picture of what the potential threat in the environment is, right? So, and then as we pay more and more attention and we pick up more cues, we start getting more dots that are in that picture, and it starts to become more clear. We can start to recognize not just the shape, but the form of whatever we're identifying. And as soon as we recognize, as soon as that form takes just enough shape where we can recognize it as a threat, that's when the decision should be triggered, right? So we're not looking for absolute clarity on the form. We don't need every single dot to get, the perfect picture. We're not looking for the 1080p resolution of the threat. We're looking for the fuzzy image that's clearly, represents somebody with hostile intent, right? That's enough. That's at that point we say, okay, time for me to do something here, right? But that's what I mean by, or that's what the way I'm using heuristic decision making in here, is that we're gathering just enough to start clarifying the picture to the point where as soon as it takes a general shape that we recognize as a threat, we can move, we can take action, right? And that's all the further we need to go. We don't need to take it any further than that before we do something, before we choose safety, right? That's the
I was
ultimate
gonna
goal.
say evasion is always the best.
Yeah. No matter what's left to us, our path out is always choose safety, right? We talked about the crane falling in New York. How hard is it to walk around one extra block so that crane poses absolutely zero risk to you at any time, right? I mean, it's just not. It may disrupt your habit because your habit does not choose safety, but it's just
Or
not
even just
hard.
being conscious of it being
Right.
there.
look up from time to time, especially if you live in a city where threats are above you all the time.
New York and it's all those scaffolds around all those buildings because nonsense falls off them on
Right.
regular basis.
Yeah. So as part of this chapter, I bring up the equation of baseline plus anomaly equals decision, right? Because I need that to be just super simple in people's minds. We're setting a baseline. We're figuring out what's supposed to be here so that we can recognize what's not supposed to be here. Then the moment that what's not makes us feel funky or off or whatever, we make a decision.
Right.
That's kind of it's truly as simple as that. There's a lot of moving pieces in there.
Well, it's actually what you're trying to teach people is actually pretty simple. The thing is that if you don't break a thing down into these pieces like you have, right? So you can actually consider each one of them. Right. You don't really get it's too easy to go sideways or think about one thing or another, or misinterpret or over exaggerate.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And our brains are great meaning making machines. They like to add details and fit things into patterns and all that kind of, we got to keep in mind, we got to keep that in mind so that we recognize these are signals coming in, pay attention to the signals coming in, right? And then our aim here is the practical, not the optimal solution, right? We don't want to lose the opportunity to choose safety, right? So we want to be looking for, okay, is this a decision point where I need to choose something that's going to keep me safe? Do I need to choose something that's going to keep me safe, right? And that's what we're looking for, is those triggers. So in order to accomplish that, the next part of the book here is I introduce my threat decision tree, right? And that's really what it is. It's a series of yes/no questions that step through.
In the notes, it says "Idiot's Guide."
It's the Idiot's Guide.
I'm just sharing that in the notes. I think he has that directed to me. I'm not sure.
But it's a really simple to implement series of pass-fail tests, right? Is this occurring? Yes, then you do this. No, keep monitoring, keep looking. Is this occurring? Yes, do this. No, and it starts from the worst and goes down to the least, right? Because if you see somebody running at you with a knife, you don't want to go, all right, is there a threat possible in my environment? No, you've already established that there's a threat possible in your environment, right? So we can skip over that decision.
That isn't listed here. That list isn't in your notes here.
No, it's not in the list. You got to read the book for that.
Good.
But
Uh,
it's a really useful tool. And this threat decision tree is really the reason I wrote this whole chapter, so that I could show this to people.
right.
And it's because it's a good tool to use to practice your decision making, right? You want to set up these kind of decision trees for as many scenarios as you can come up with, because what that's doing is that's training your brain to respond in these situations, right? Just like, if you're taking a self-defense class or a martial arts class or something, you repeat the same patterns over and over again so that your body's used to
It's right.
executing that movement when something is introduced that triggers that movement. We want the same thing to happen with our threat decision matrices. We
Yes.
want to practice this stuff so that it just gets triggered when those threats are introduced, right? Because our brain starts to shut down when it's suddenly introduced to stress, right? Our fight, flight,
Yes.
freeze instincts take over, and we're not thinking so much anymore. And we want to get out in front of that, right? So we want to be working through these decision trees so that we start when the right kind of signal comes in or the wrong kind of signal comes in, it triggers that threat decision tree that we've already been practicing. Right? It fits one of those models already that we've been working through in our head.
Right.
As we create as many of these threat decision trees as we can think of, right? And then right away, that helps us identify, this is a decision point. This is where I need to choose safety. I've already walked through this. I'm recognizing the signs I've already set in my brain. I've already got a file folder for this built. So all I got to do is pull out the response that I've already got in my threat decision tree and take it and apply it. Right. So this is really the practice piece of this chapter, is this threat decision tree part in here. This is the practical exercise of this chapter. So
All right. So I just pulled up the
yeah.
chat. Okay, he's serious. It's really here. I'm teasing. What's
No,
the rule
it's
of threes?
all right. So the next part is rule three, and I use the rule of threes all throughout the book, but it comes into play here as well, right? So as we become under duress, it gets harder and harder to retain sequences, right? Normally, we can do about 7 things at once. We can hold about 7 operations in our head at one time. As stress is introduced, and as those as the adrenaline gets flooded in our system and things like that, that constricts, and we get to about at best we can hold about 3 concepts or processes in our head. And because of that,
Yeah.
a lot of our emergency responses are grouped into threes. You got your 911, your tap, rack, bang, your stop, drop, roll. That's why those are all in threes. It's because that's about as many as you can hold when you're under duress, right? And so that's why I use threes all the time in the book here, because I'm trying to help people navigate duress, right? So that's why I get into the rules of 3 here, and so that's why my threat decision tree is 3 steps. Right? It's because I wanted to stick to that rules of 3. So it's a 3-step process, right? There's 3 decision steps in the decision matrix, and that's why it's just because that rule of 3 still applies. So the next step in thinking about additional practices for speeding up decision making is think like a bad guy.
I like that one.
Yeah, and this is a super useful training tool.
Naughty.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, you want to be thinking like whatever threat might be in that environment. How are they thinking? Right? They have needs too. They're responding to their needs too. They're trying to use the environment to their advantage as well. If you can start to think like them a little bit, you'll more quickly pick up on the signals they're giving off, and you're training yourself. You're training your decision-making process to respond to those because you already thought them through. You've already thought that process through. So it's not like you have to come up with a brand new, you don't have to invent a new decision. It's a decision you already have made. And all you have to do is execute it once it occurs because you've gone through the process in your head, right? So, and I really mean that.
So many walks of life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is true.
It's like
And
drive paranoid.
Well, and that, you use the term wargaming all the time. We should be wargaming every situation we walk into.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean I walk in there with hostile intent. That just means I'm thinking about what might occur in here and how I might respond to it. Right. And again, this is one of those things where as you practice it, it becomes less of a stressor, right? You can get into this situation when you start doing this where you're wargaming so much that you're almost paralyzing yourself because you're thinking of all the variables that might happen in the room. Right. But as you get more comfortable with the practice of this, and as you do it more, you're quickly eliminating all the things that are completely absurd in that space. And you narrow down to just the few, factors that are actually in play because you're getting better and better at building baselines and recognizing anomalies. And so those are the ones that you quickly it becomes a very, very quick process that you quickly war game in that scenario, right? And then you have, you know, a handful of responses ready all the time in every situation you find yourself in, right? So, and that, you know, those are some of the questions. Like, how would I use the space if I were the bad guy? How would I move through it? What would I be avoiding or gravitating towards if I was the bad guy? Right? If I'm a pickpocket, I'm going to be moving in close proximity to people, closer proximity than I need to be. Right? Why is this guy bumping into everybody as he walks through this area?
The pickpockets ruin a lot of venues.
Yeah,
They're really frustrating.
yeah,
Little gypsy kids in particular, so
yeah,
annoying.
yeah. And a
Anyway,
big one, a big one for that is what or who would make me uncomfortable in this environment, right? Like if there's a cop or a security guard standing in one corner, who do I see avoiding that corner like it's the plague? There's a reason they're avoiding that corner, right? That thing there represents a threat to them. They're being proximically pushed away from what they perceive as a threat. And if they're a threat to you, then you need to recognize that. So stuff like that, right? That's what I mean when I say think like a bad guy. Another one of the exercises I use, I didn't put in our notes here, but stand out in front of your house. I think, how would I break in here? What accesses would I look for? What would I be concerned about from your neighbors if I was looking at getting into your space here? What would I look for? How would I get in there? Right? I mean, we can explore our own vulnerabilities by looking at how we would exploit our vulnerabilities, right? And then we can close those vulnerabilities because now we know, or we have a better understanding of how they would be exploited. So the next one after that, after thinking like a bad guy, is building file folders, right? And so every experience you have.
how do you go from something that fun to something that boring?
Well,
I mean, you got to find a way. Think like a bad guy's fun, and then you go to building file folders.
Well, they're tied together.
Joy.
They're tied together, right?
Okay.
So right. every experience you have gets used in evaluating all the new experiences you have, all the new encounters, right? Every experience you have becomes part of your pattern matching system for the next set of experiences that you have, right? So all I mean by file folders is those past experiences are your file folders, or the data sets you pull from when you're confronted with new, patterns, right? New things that you have to evaluate. Now, the reason I use file folders is because you're not limited to just your own.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things I'm doing in the book is I'm offering myself as the example over and over again. That's very intentional because each one of those examples, I'm hoping the reader onboards as a file folder. I don't need them to go through the negative experience I went through in order to have the benefit of knowing what happens or what occurs in that negative experience, right? They can use mine. I'm gifting them my experiences in the form of, here's a file folder to add to yours, so that as you are confronted with these experiences or these challenges, you can draw from your own and from the ones I've provided you to extrapolate what to do for your decision and what action for you to take, right? And so that's what I mean by file folders. Now, the trick there is you want to get them from quality sources, right? Building your file folders from movies and video games is a terrible idea. These are all scripted. These are, you're not going to John Wick your way out of a challenging situation.
Fights don't last that long.
Right. They don't. They don't. Right. Nor do you have the stamina or the dexterity or anything else. And your bad guys aren't cooperating with you because they read the script and all those kinds of things. Right. So don't build your file folders.
And they do come all at you all at once.
Yes, all at once. And they will kick you in the head while you're down and things like that. Yeah. So don't use that, but do, when you're talking to people that are experts in fields, or, you're talking to people that deal with criminals on a regular basis, where you're talking to police, guys, or security guards or prison guards or anybody else that's in contact with dangerous situations on a regular basis, listen to how they're navigating those environments. When you watch, something on YouTube that's a live feed of a violent encounter, a threatening encounter, a challenging encounter, look at how that unfolded and onboard that as part of your file folder system that you can extrapolate from, right? But look for real sources, look for real encounters, look for unscripted responses and how things are navigated in real situations, right? That's what I mean by quality sources that you want to onboard as part of your file system to extrapolate from and pull from.
I want to repeat something that we've covered in a lot of chapters real quickly, because I always get this. I'm always afraid someone says, I don't want to live my life like that. You don't have to. He's saying that once you develop the basic competency, right? You want to, it's like anything else. You want to learn to play golf. Okay. You're going to go play, and, take a few lessons and play a few rounds and you get 80% of it, right? Well,
Yes.
this is just saying that you got to, if you want to get good at this, you want to develop basic human competency and get the mindfulness from it. You're going to spend a little time on it, but you're not going to like obsess over this stuff forever,
No.
right? You're not, right? It becomes a habit.
And one of the things that I hope becomes apparent for readers as they're reading this, because I truly believe that this is the case, is the crazy amount of anxiety that people feel now, that you're feeling now as a person just wandering the world, is because you don't have this foundation in place.
Yeah.
You're under constant stress from all the stuff. You can't not be. That's how we evolved. Our brain is taking in these signals all the time, and you have developed nothing to accommodate for that. You've developed no skills, no practices. You haven't had just the exposure of watching your parents do it, of navigate these things. So you are in such a vulnerable position that you're under just crazy amounts of anxiety all the time, and you don't need to be, right? So yeah, learning this stuff at first, it's going to feel like it's making that anxiety a little bit worse. But when you get through to the end of it, it's going to remove so much of that just low level, constant anxiety that you've been experiencing. Right? And that's one of my big goals here. We're trying to navigate the world as humans, but we're never taught how to be human. Right? That's all I'm trying to do, is get you back to a point where, you can navigate this place as a human, because now you know how to do it as a human. You know that all of these signals that you're getting are good. You're not a bad person because you recognize differences between people.
Right.
That's a good thing. That's how you keep yourself alive in potentially hostile environments.
Is this sort of like, of course, I'm from, where I am, but I mean, I spent a lot of my adult life in Washington State, which until recently had pretty open gun laws. And so what I noticed is the women who carry have mindfulness.
Yes.
Now, I can't figure out how much of that's a selection, but what you notice is the women who carry, all of a sudden, they just are less stressed in general. Now, that's sort of like the more serious version, I guess, is
Right. Yeah.
right? Is that the same thing you're talking about?
It is the same thing, and I can't, I'm speaking on behalf of these people, and I oughtn't, but from my experience in working with people that are just beginning carrying, it's always more stressful at the very beginning.
Yes.
At the very beginning, people are touching it, making sure it's in the right place, so you can tell a new carry person, right? Because they're super paranoid about that gun. They're super paranoid about what that gun's capable of. They're super paranoid about being a responsible person in possession of that gun, right? Yeah. But as you build the competence, right, that anxiety, that pressure, that stress reduces, diminishes, goes away. It's not that the sense of responsibility goes away. It's just your own confidence in your ability to handle that responsibility increases.
That's right.
That's what the competence provides, is it improves that confidence. Right? And that's what we're really trying to build here, is build enough competence so that you have the confidence to navigate these situations.
I just like women who have that mindfulness, because you get way less crazy out of them. I just love it.
So many of the threats that we're experiencing today, like online, all that kind of stuff, wouldn't be threats if women knew how to call them out as threats, because we would know how to address them. We would know how to confront them.
Yes.
So our whole system is vulnerable because people don't have this stuff.
Yep. That makes perfect sense.
And those were not jobs that guys necessarily evolved to do, because they were internal conflicts.
Yep.
Right? This isn't a tiger ready to kill us. This is the neighbor ready to kill us.
So are your 3 questions part of this getting people to that position?
Yeah. So, it's similar to the thing like a bad guy, but there again, rules of 3, right? So there's 3 questions to use just in general that you can just ask at any time, right? And this is for any situation you're in, right? What's going on here? What would cause somebody to stand out and why? And what would I do about it? Right? This is the 3 simple questions of situational awareness, right? If you can just remember to ask yourself these 3 questions, then you're going to be way ahead of everybody. I mean, less than 1% of the world learns this stuff right now, at least in the West. Right. So if you just get comfortable and put these questions on repeat, you're going to be way ahead of everybody else.
I walk into a room. Where are the exits, and how do I kill everybody in here?
Yep.
Right. It's just clockwork. There's no emotion.
No.
It's like, what temperature is it?
And that doesn't make the room more dangerous to you.
No,
or
it
you're
makes
more dangerous to the room. It's just part of your process of entering the space,
right.
right? It's like, do I have my keys when I get out of my car? It's the same
Right.
type of
It's
thought,
the same thing. It doesn't
right?
really
I
require
don't
any.
stress. It's not a stress inducer unless I can't find them, right? Just like if I can't find the exits, it would be a
Well,
stress
what's a
inducer,
stress inducer is not doing it and being
right?
surprised by it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So that's why I, those three questions. Again, all of these tools, they're just different ways to speed up that decision-making process so that you can take the action, so that you can choose safety, so that you can get yourself out away from whatever the threat is, right? We want to stay left of bang. Bang is that bad thing you don't want to be a part of. Right of bang is the aftermath. Left of bang is doing something before the bad thing happens, right? That we're smart enough, we're intelligent enough, we're evolved enough, we're human enough to know that signals, that every threat is giving off signals, and we
Yes.
can leverage that to our benefit and get out in front of it instead of having to have it keep hitting us in the face over and over again. It drives me crazy.
I
So
get teased about my hyper gregariousness all the time, but part of it is I'm rendering the environment safe,
yeah,
right? I
yes,
mean, you might sit there and be passive about it, which is sit back. But one of the reasons I interact with my environment is I want to feel safe. And because I know it's hard to imagine this, Luke, I know. I mean, Luke likes to tease me, but in my past, I've been considered intimidating despite my stature. And so what the other thing to do is to take intimidation off the table,
yes.
right? So it works both directions.
Mhm.
So I like what you teach, Luke. It's very good.
Well, and that's the thing, as you become more aware of the signals coming in, you become more aware of the signals you're giving off as
Yes.
well. And that's a huge element to this, right? Are you introducing conflict into the space just by the signals you're giving off, right? Do you have that come fight me face on? You
Yes.
don't want to wear
Yes.
that when you're walking into a hostile situation. That doesn't de-escalate anything, right? So
Right.
there's stuff like that comes into play as you learn this. We talked a lot through a lot of these chapters how this stuff is really applicable widely, right? It's
Yeah.
applicable in all of our interactions. My focus is on threat identification, but that's only because I'm dealing with the needs. I'm dealing with our physiological needs, our safety, security, things like that, right? That's what my focus is on. But
That's
the
also your job.
applicability of this, right? Yes, but the applicability of this stuff is in all human interaction,
Right. Right.
right? And so that's important to keep in mind. And the same thing is true about this speeding up decision making. As you get better and better and faster at decision making, you're going to get more and more successful at all the things you're engaging in.
And it's neural economy, right? We talk about
Yeah,
neural economy and everything, which is, look, it's just you're investing in a neural economy.
right.
Eventually it becomes, I mean, like we were just talking a minute ago, I don't think about this stuff.
Right.
It just it's just a habit that you do
Yeah.
when you go in a room. Oh, is it warm in
Well,
here?
as you become more confident in your ability to be responsible, you don't spend as much time about thinking about, will this fail? Because you'll take responsibility for it if it does. So you can take the bigger risks, you can take the bigger challenges, you can take
True,
the bigger
true.
steps, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. In business, I consider myself risk averse, but I actually am. I'm just risk tolerant because of what you teach,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yes.
risk tolerant because I'm aware of my competency, and if
Yes.
I go into a situation where I'm going to go into a business or whatever, it's because I've thought about, well, what are the threats? What are the opportunities?
Yeah.
Well, can I manage the threats? What's
Yep.
the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Right? If the worst that can happen is something I can deal with, it's not really a risk. It
And
might be
what you're describing here is the ideal conditions for optimal cooperation to me. Because if we're both in that place and we're engaging with each other, we can make fantastic things happen.
That's right.
Right.
So see, that's the beauty of. I guess I didn't understand it for just a moment. You're actually trying to. I always complained that what I do was really complicated, right? But you're actually trying to do something equally complicated. Because you're actually trying to say to people, you're going to be more mindful, you're going to be a better cooperator if you're more aware of your environment and you're more competent in reacting to it.
Yes.
Right? It sounds like you're asking people to be paranoid. You're not. You're
No.
saying, I'm going to give you some basic mindfulness so that you're able to be relaxed and actually able to cooperate with people better.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And is that a hard, I mean, that seems to me counterintuitive.
It's a challenge. The bummer about all this stuff is we're the conditioning has been so successful that all of this is a hard sell. I'm trying to sell people that exist in a world where they're supposed to pretend threats don't exist.
Yes.
And my whole goal is to teach them how to navigate threats.
Well, the thing is, though, and again, I keep saying that Luke teaches at this very basic level, but just like he said, I said, well, here's how I look at business opportunities. He's like, yeah, but look how that applies at this very different level of cooperation. Luke's sit down here in the weeds, teaching you basically the cellular automaton that allows you to express everything at the most complex, elaborate level. But it's sort of like if you don't understand engineering, you can't build the architecture of the building, right? And you're saying that thing. And so I just look at this as I see how many people can get trapped in anything we do. I mean, and I learned another thing about the via negativa of what you do today, right? I mean, it's another via negativa process. You can only become this good thing by the negative process of eliminating the bads.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And I learned a lot from you, really. I don't want it to go to his head. So I don't want to say too often. But so in this via negativa process, you're producing a via positiva good.
Yes.
And it's not like I live in fear. No. I'm an agentic person because of what I've learned here. And there's no way to, and if you didn't do it the way you teach it, it would almost be a lie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. It would be this false promise nonsense that's framed as happy, nice people nonsense.
Right.
Because you teach as falsification.
Yes.
Now it's basically science, and you build up on it, and you can have this expression of the goodness. I learned a lot in this. I learn a lot in every one of our conversations. But this sort of we're getting to the end now, so this is tying things together, right?
Yeah. This is tying things, and that's what I have to have the individual elements in place before I can tie them all together into this decision-making process, right? And give people the decision-making matrix, right? Because that's what those tools are for, right? And so that's the big takeaway here is that, we want to get to a point where we have a foundation of competence in place. We're getting confident because of that foundation of competence, and that's allowing us to make decisions more and more rapidly with less and less information. Right. And that's the big goal here with all of this is to get to a point where we're making decisions, and those decisions are leading us to take action, to take steps to improve our safety, to get safe. We're choosing safety. We're getting out from the threat, or we're choosing whatever leads us to the ideal outcomes in whatever situation we're in. Right. If we're not talking about threat navigation.
Well, is that how you wrap up the chat? Did we just wrap up the
chapter? We wrapped up the chapter. I focus on needs because needs are the common thread for all humans. We all have different preferences. We all have different desires, but needs are universal, right? And so everything that we do, I talk about this being broadly applicable, everything that any of us do to acquire confidence and competence in relation to how our needs get met gives us an advantage over those that remain dependent, over those that aren't taking any steps to improve their ability to meet their own needs, right? So all of the people absorbing this material, applying this material, have a leg up on people that aren't. Now, I want everybody to have that. I want, if I'm honest, I want everybody to have this foundation. This is how we evolved. This is what humanity is supposed to look like, is having this skill set in place as we navigate the world. That's not the case anymore. But anyone that takes this stuff on is in a better place than anyone that isn't, because they can navigate. They're that much more competent at navigating challenges in their environments. So whatever those challenges may be. But yeah.
So, all right. So, I'm sorry. I usually try to end it with an upbeat twist to some bits of humor there, but you sort of wrapped everything up such a nice bow. I'm like, I don't know where to go now. So anyway, so let's go. Let's remind people of your book, which is the Primal Primer.
Yep, the Primal Primer.
Right.
And it's survive anything, slay anxiety, and exit the system. We talked about what those mean today. Right. You get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the online booksellers have it available. My website is corehumancompetence.com, right? I'm actually selling this stuff to organizations and whatnot. I teach all this material to employees and staff and stuff so they can recognize when the bad guy enters there.
And they don't run away
space.
screaming?
Well, not usually. Every once in a while. That's the best situations in those is when the light bulb goes off and they recognize that I may be a threat in there.
Yeah.
Where I've taught them enough where they recognize how dangerous I could be.
Yes.
in their space. So
all right. So all right, thank you very much. I guess we're doing chapter 15 next.
Yep, we got 15 and after that is 16. 15 is fear, and then 16 is just the wrap up. It's the conclusion chapter.
So I'm looking forward to it. For the audience, I hope you've enjoyed this. These are really fun interviews for me. Luke does this all the time, so I mean it's probably old hat for him, but for me it's fast.
Oh, I love them. These are great. Right. These are fantastic.
Right. So I'm Kurt Doolittle from the Natural Law Institute. This is my good friend Luke Weinhagen, and thanks for watching.